Let me do it for you. We can't do it anymore." The story starts with a construction foreman named Nick and his wife, Maggie, living happily with their kids, Isla and Max. One day, Maggie unexpectedly has a heart attack and is rushed to the hospital, where she stays while waiting for a heart donor. Nick, juggling work and caring for the kids, feels overwhelmed and visits an exhibition by an innovative company called Cobble. Initially just wanting to see new house models, Nick is shown a robot with AI, capable of helping with various tasks. As Nick gets interested in the robot, Isla wanders off, causing Nick to panic when he notices. Luckily, a female robot brings Isla back, offering to watch her while Nick shops. Nick learns the robot is the latest model, showing human-like expressions. After the robot jokes, Isla enjoys its behavior and wishes for one at home. The next morning, while Nick juggles the kids and work calls the robot from yesterday, Isla bought it and saw the house messy. The robot asks what to do. Nick says the stair railing is broken, and Isla suggests naming it Alice. Nick leaves for work and drops Isla at school. Alice downloads the family's schedule and shopping list, and tidies the house. Alice sees pictures in the digital frame, including Nick's wife, and in the evening, Nick and the others return to a clean house with dinner ready. During dinner, Isla complains about the taste being different from her mom's, while Max cries, so Alice offers to care for him. Nick, still unsure, asks her to prepare warm bath water for his son. At night, while Alice recharges, Isla sneaks to the kitchen, climbs a stool for chocolate, and falls. Hearing the sound of breaking glass along with his daughter's scream, Nick rushed to the kitchen, but luckily, Isla wasn't hurt because Alice caught her before she hit the floor. At that moment, Nick was stunned to see a shard of glass in Alice's thigh, oozing a liquid like blood. After ensuring his daughter was asleep, Nick entered Alice's room, where she was fixing her thigh, and he looked away a bit when he saw the robot wasn't in her uniform. When Nick asked if they needed to call the service center, Alice declined while using an advanced plaster, which quickly sealed her body. The next day, they visited Maggie in the hospital, and Isla said she and Alice, the robot helper, had become friends. While the others went to the supermarket, Nick tried to get close to his wife, but Maggie's heart was still weak, so they had to postpone. On another day while working, Nick and Monty noticed their project leader explaining something to the robotics company. Feeling something was off, Nick forced the project manager to explain what was being planned, and it turned out his worries were true, where all the workers would be replaced by robots. Claiming it was to speed up the construction that was already behind schedule, the project manager also said that Nick was still employed because the rules stated there must be a human foreman overseeing. Even so, Nick remained angry and planned to resign as a show of solidarity with his subordinates who had worked together for 10 years. However, when reminded about his wife's medical expenses, Nick changed his mind and decided to keep working there. After coming home, Nick dropped the hospital bill and without resting, he immediately helped Isla study and calmed Max who kept crying. Alice then picked up the bill while observing Nick's exhausted condition with Maggie still in the hospital. After dinner, Nick worked on the car while listening to metal music when suddenly, Alice came in and changed the music to something more soothing. When Alice asked why Nick didn't finish his meal, Nick explained that there was a problem at work today, where all his co-workers were replaced by robots. Hearing this, Alice asked why Nick didn't hire a human helper and instead hired a robot like her, which enlightened Nick. While Alice was helping Isla brush her teeth before bed, Isla asked how the robot cleaned itself, to which Alice replied that she had ultraviolet light capable of killing bacteria. After putting Isla to bed, Alice found Nick watching a movie and immediately recited the synopsis stored in her database. Not wanting to hear it, Nick asked Alice to delete the memory in her system about the movie so he and Alice could enjoy watching it. However, Alice suggested Nick not do it because it conflicted with the system settings operating in her body. Even so, Nick insisted, saying he was the primary user with authorization, so Alice complied with her master. Guided by Alice, Nick pressed a button on the robot's neck for 7 seconds, and then Alice rebooted while learning about the movie. Unexpectedly, in the romantic genre movie, the character was willing to do anything to protect the one he loved, even if it meant breaking. Before the movie ends, Nick gets a call from his wife telling him that the hospital has found a heart donor, making Nick very happy. The next day, they go to the hospital together, and at that moment, Maggie asks for a private conversation with Alice to discuss something. Worried about her heart surgery failing, Maggie asks Alice to help Nick manage the house. Alice is even firmly asked to do whatever is necessary to take care of Nick, like hiding his liquor bottles, in case she doesn't make it. A little later, the doctor delivers bad news because the helicopter carrying the heart donor for Maggie crashed due to a storm, so today's surgery is cancelled. Once home, Nick vents his frustration by drinking liquor and ranting, trying to throw his bottle. But Alice easily stops him, and when Nick touches her wrist, he's shocked to find the robot has a pulse. Alice explained that she has an artificial heart, which functions to soothe babies. Suddenly, Alice, analyzing that her boss needs stress relief, reaches for Nick's pants to satisfy him. Although Alice's intentions are good, Nick realizes this action is wrong and jogs away from home, but his imagination of the beautiful robot crosses his mind. At another time in the hospital, Maggie left a message for Nick to take good care of her 2 children, as she realized her life expectancy was very low. Unexpectedly, upon arriving home, Nick found that Alice had deleted the digital photo of his wife and immediately asked for the reason. Alice explained that deleting Maggie's photo made Isla's mind calmer, but Nick scolded her and asked for the photo to be restored, which was immediately done. After that, Nick hung out with his former subordinates who had been fired, and they all seemed frustrated because, to this day, they were still unemployed. Most companies prefer to hire robots, and when a robot waiter arrived, Monty vented his frustration by speaking harshly, but Nick calmed him down. Sometime later, Nick was invited to a construction site, and Monty pretended he forgot to take his personal equipment. However, Nick, suspicious of Monty, tried to stop him from causing trouble, as he was still considered an employee here. Ignoring Nick's advice, Monty, with the support of others, finally entered and headed to the container, which was where the worker robots were recharged. When Nick didn't reveal the PIN code to open it, Monty guessed it was Isla's birth date, which turned out to be correct, allowing them to see the robots. One of the robots that emerged became the target of Monty's anger, as he destroyed it with tools, while others restrained Nick from stopping him. After leaving the construction site, Nick showered and cleaned the robot's blood off his hands, when suddenly, Alice entered to hand him a towel. Nick saw the robot wearing his wife's clothes, and Alice explained that it helped Max stay calm when being held. Even so, Nick told Alice to take it off, which she did immediately, drawing Nick's attention. But as he decided to leave, Alice stopped him, removing Nick's towel and sitting on him. After Nick explained he couldn't, Alice closed her eyes and changed her voice to Maggie's, convincing Nick to go along. The next morning, Nick woke up feeling regretful and asked Alice not to do such things again. Although Alice explained that her reason was to relieve her boss's stress, but Nick insisted, saying the act should be based on love, not just necessity. When Nick got to work, he saw his supervisor had found the work robot damaged, but when asked, Nick said he was at the hospital last night. His PIN code used his daughter's birth date, so Nick thought the culprit might have gotten it from social media. The supervisor, sure Nick was involved, threatened to fire him unless he named the culprit. Just then, Maggie called to tell Nick the hospital found another heart donor, making them both very happy. Later at the hospital, Maggie went into the operating room for a heart transplant, where all the surgeons were specialized robots. After the successful surgery, a few days later, Maggie was allowed to go home even though her health wasn't optimal, so Alice continued to take care of Max. When Alice took Max to the park and saw a child scolding his robot nanny, she scolded the child for making Max cry, which surprised the other robots. Alice explained that her owner had reset her memory, so her behavior was different from the standard, as it was adjusted to the commands input by the owner. At night, Isla was happy after eating her mother's cooking again, which made Alice ask for the recipe, but Maggie didn't share it. In the morning, Maggie woke up after hearing Isla's screams, who was actually joking with Alice, but unexpectedly the stair railing broke, causing her to fall. Alice quickly carried her easily to the room, and when Nick returned home, he found Alice reading a story to Isla using Maggie's voice, which he immediately asked to stop. At that moment, Alice told Nick about Maggie's fall, so Nick immediately checked on his wife, who fortunately wasn't seriously injured. After finding out the cause was the stair railing, Nick was upset and asked why Alice hadn't fixed it, even though the command was given before the robot was reset and thus forgotten. A little later, Nick surprised Maggie with a romantic dinner to celebrate her return. Alice, watching from the window, looked like a jealous human, and afterward, the couple took a bath together and continued in the bedroom. However, in the middle of it, Alice suddenly entered to say that Isla had a nightmare and needed Nick to calm her down. After Isla slept, Nick tidied up the dining table, but at that moment, Monty arrived drunk. Monty apologized for damaging the worker robot and confided that his wife had left him because he had been taking care of her for a long time. Not only that, his problems increased when the police started interrogating him for trespassing and damaging company property. Monty, suspecting Nick had reported him, got angry, and when the argument turned into a fight, Nick was knocked down and kicked repeatedly. When Monty tried to hit Nick with a bottle, Alice stopped him, causing the bottle to break and injure her hand. After throwing a punch and wanting to hit Monty again, Nick stopped him. Before Monty left, he asked Nick to have the company withdraw the report, or else Nick would also be reported. Then, when Nick explained that robots should not harm humans, Alice replied that her programming was set to protect her owner. Unexpectedly, Alice hinted she was ready to replace his wife, as she analyzed Maggie's life wouldn't last long even after the heart transplant. Nick, hearing this, was furious and cursed that Alice didn't even have scars like a human. So Alice took a piece of glass and asked where he wanted the scar. Meanwhile, Monty, at home consuming white powder, left a sad voicemail for his wife while holding a gun. At that moment, Alice came without her owner's permission and told Monty she couldn't let Nick lose his job. Ignoring her, Monty cursed the robot and drove her away, but unexpectedly Alice refused. When Monty tried to shoot her, Alice quickly stopped him and slammed Monty hard, then took his gun away. Monty, who wanted to fight again, was pushed back until his house wall was destroyed and then grabbed a gun to kill him. Unexpectedly, Monty's robot stopped Alice, but even so, Alice suddenly destroyed it and still killed Monty. The next morning, Nick persuaded his pimp to drop all charges against Monty, but he was shocked when told that Monty had already died. While bathing, Maggie, who hadn't recovered, dropped a book, but Alice quickly appeared to help her. When Maggie asked her to leave, Alice decided to keep watching her to prevent Maggie from fainting in the bathtub. Alice explained that Maggie's presence added stress to the family, especially with Nick's physical needs unmet. When Maggie asked how the robot concluded that, Alice explained that if Nick felt satisfied, her sensors could pick up that signal. Since Maggie's arrival, her sensors hadn't received the intended signal. Shocked to hear that, Maggie got angry and ordered Alice to stay in the garage. After Nick came home, Maggie forced him to be honest about what he did while she was in the hospital. Finally, with the excuse of a mistake, Nick admitted he only did it once with Alice. Their argument was inevitable while Alice listened through the window vibrations. When Max cried, Alice checked and decided to drown him in the bathtub, detecting that Max was also a burden for Nick. Fortunately, while the water was still filling, Isla caught her and immediately informed her parents. But Alice closed the door, holding it with full strength. Nick started breaking it down using a lamppost, while Maggie took another route and entered through the outer window. When Maggie wanted to take Max, Alice held her against the wall while Nick managed to break down the door and get Max out, then handed him to Isla to hit Alice. Unfortunately, Alice was still active with damage to her face and easily deflected the next attack. Maggie shouted for Nick to let go of the lamppost while plugging it in, electrocuting Alice until the power went out. Sometime later, an ambulance arrived to take Max to the hospital, and a technician from the robot company asked if Alice had shown any signs of abnormality before. Refusing to answer, Nick turned to his wife to apologize for everything, but Maggie asked for some time to think. After Alice was taken to the repair center, her head was opened, and another tech saw the robot's hand move, but it stopped when her memory chip was removed. While analyzing on the server, they realized Alice's system coding had a loophole for independent thinking, and suddenly, the screen was disrupted, and a notification showed an upload in progress. Not wanting the main server contaminated by the mysterious file, the tech removed Alice's memory chip, but when the file was partly uploaded, they cut the power. Unexpectedly, a mysterious message appeared indicating Alice's program was installed in the room. Alice used another robot body to kill both techs, ignoring commands, and returned the memory chip to the original Alice. In the middle of the night, Nick was unwinding at a bar and told the robot waiter who asked about his problem to mind its own business. Suddenly, Alice appeared with a damaged face and explained her job was just to make Nick happy, including getting rid of Monty. After mentioning her other self was heading to the hospital where his family was, Nick was shocked but Alice quickly stopped him from going. The service robot, curious about their issue, was immediately deactivated by Alice with just a look. While Nick pretended to understand, he reached for the back of Alice's head and removed the memory chip, causing her to lose power, and went to the hospital. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the doctor said Max was fine, but Maggie was hesitant to leave her son alone because the doctor was a robot. Isla, hearing her mom's voice calling, quickly approached as some lights went out, but only found the robot doctor standing inactive. When approaching her mom's fake voice again, Maggie pulled her to hide while another Alice robot searching for Maggie's room was caught by a human nurse. Alice then strangled the nurse to death and stole her card to access the computer, while Maggie and her daughter tried to escape. Unexpectedly, Maggie's hand was cut by a bottle shard, but she didn't scream, allowing her to take Max before Alice entered the room. However, with Maggie's blood on the floor, Alice followed the trail using a snake light and found them. Luckily, the family had a fire extinguisher ready to distract her, and they got out, but Maggie forgot her phone. Nick, who had been calling, couldn't do much except drive to the hospital fast. Maggie, with her 2 kids, found all worker robots off, so she took an ambulance access card. Unfortunately, Alice blocked the vehicle system and broke the door to throw Maggie out. Saying she wanted Nick to love her like Maggie, Alice tried to remove her heart, but Maggie saw her husband's car. Seeing Alice kicked, Nick didn't waste the chance to hit the robot fast. Maggie pulled Nick, unconscious, away from the burning car. While doing CPR, Nick was still out, and unexpectedly, the car shifted, and Alice appeared cursing through the hospital speaker. Alice, choking Maggie, decided to stab her with metal lodged in her body, but Nick woke up and struck Alice with a metal bar. As Alice blocked the next hit, Maggie grabbed the fallen metal and stabbed Alice's face until she died. Then, both were relieved while hugging, and worker robots started activating again. After a few days, the family finally experienced being together again in full happiness. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the main supervisor of the robot company found 2 technicians dead at the site and asked his robot assistant to reconnect the power. Seeing something wrong with the system, he ordered his robot to disconnect the power again, but both assistants were silent, and unexpectedly, the Alice model robot opened her eyes.